کاوش مدیا.
Just imagine you needed a life-saving bandage for yourself or for your child, but geopolitics prevented you from getting it. It sounds like a strange hypothetical, but that's exactly what's happening in Iran right now. Last month, the United Nations criticized a Swedish medical manufacturer for breaching their international responsibility when they decided to stop all their shipments to Iran, including specific bandages that only they make for people who suffer from a severe and life-threatening skin condition that's known as EB and often affects children. Already, according to an Iranian NGO, dozens of patients, mostly kids, have died since the company stopped its exports to Iran in 2018. If you remember, 2018 was when then President Donald Trump tore up the nuclear deal and reimposed US sanctions on Iran that had previously been lifted. The thing is, as defenders of sanctions like to point out, there are humanitarian exceptions to them, including for things like those bandages. But the Swedish company told the Iranians they decided not to conduct any business with relation to Iran for the time being. This also applies to business conducted under any form of exceptions to the US economic sanctions. See, the web of US sanctions against Iran, around 1,600 imposed by Trump alone, 1,600, is so large, so expansive, so threatening, that companies who do have humanitarian exceptions would rather totally pull out of Iran, rather stay away, than risk violating any of those sanctions, even accidentally. They don't want to upset the United States. And it's had a catastrophic effect on the Iranian people. A Human Rights Watch report from 2019 found that despite the exemptions, broad US sanctions were restricting Iranians' access to critical drugs for epilepsy and chemotherapy. And as Iranians suffered through one of the world's worst COVID-19 outbreaks, it was sanctions that restricted the country from importing medical equipment and later even vaccines. That is to say nothing of the devastating economic effects that sanctions have had on the country as a whole. But it does help explain why Iran's new, more conservative administration has agreed to return to the nuclear negotiating table this week. So where do negotiations in Vienna stand after day two? What are the Iranians offering? And is the Biden administration doing enough to make a deal? Joining me now to discuss this is Vali Nasser, Professor of International Affairs and Middle East Studies at Johns Hopkins University. He also served as a senior State Department advisor in the Obama administration. Vali, welcome back to the show. For those of us who are hoping the US and Iran reach a deal, but haven't been following the negotiations all of this year, and the ones this week with Iran's new government, where, in your view, do things stand? Is there any chance that something positive comes out of these talks and comes out of them soon?
Well, I think we shouldn't expect too much from this round of talks. I think the best news would be if the talks continue. There's a new Iranian team that has come to Vienna for the talk. They're not going to immediately cut a deal. The United States and Iran agreed on a large number of sanctions to be lifted, but it's the last few that are most critical. And I think one of the most important issues is that the Iranians are afraid of getting into another deal with the United States and then the U.S. Doing what Trump did one more time. In other words, pull out of the deal.
آنچه در مورد ما میگویند